It's also very aware of the political enabling environment, the degree to which that is favorable or perhaps less favorable in terms of the policies that are being espoused by politicians and government. But we could put regulator in the middle there too. That'd be kind of interesting. Now, where do you fit in that? You're obviously exercising under a legal mandate. You've got the law. You've got a public which is quite concerned. And you have political masters who have policies and directions as well. So one of the big questions that comes out of all of this is, whose risk are you managing? Now, in the mining sector, it's quite clear that by managing the risk to the stakeholders, in this case, the communities that are affected by mining operations, the companies are managing their own risk. They're managing their socio-political risk. Because communities have the power to make life very difficult for mining companies. They can blockade the gate. They can shut down the project. In the early stages of a project, in the exploration phase, they can pretty much paralyze a project and drive it out of business. We've got a number of quite interestingly, potentially very valuable mining projects out there that are stalled. It may be 20 years before it's possible to do anything with them, and that's because of social conflict. But there are other little bits and pieces here that are kind of a worry. You know, whilst it's a straight company, community, or internal to the company type of issue around social license, things are quite straightforward. But there are cases when other players get into the game, outside interests. We kind of call that the dark side of the social license. There are other people that will claim an interest. And suddenly it's not about whether the pipeline is a threat to a river crossing or a community that's upset because it's going to take a route under or through or across the edge of a nature reserve or a park or something like that. No, it suddenly becomes global climate change. Is that a social license issue? Not necessarily. That's a political issue. That's operating at a whole other scale. I wouldn't call that a social license issue, but people claim it as a social license issue. And that's when this whole thing does become political in a very uncomfortable way. So, just to bring this to a closure, the social license we found to be a really quite intriguing subject. It's intriguing because of its dynamic nature. It's intriguing because of its very close relationship to political processes at the local level, and even political processes within companies. We know a lot about it. As I said, we've got these different PhD studies that throw some light on it, and here's one of them. This is from Mariano Galvao-Lyra's work. She's a PhD student at the University of Eastern Finland. She's actually a Brazilian by birth, and worked for a while in the mining industry before going over to Finland and working on her PhD. And what she's found is kind of key and something that works at every level, is that there are two drivers for the need for a social license or for the drivers that people have looking for a social license. The primary one is this belief in protection, belief that they are looked after, belief that they are they're not going to be harmed, not intentionally, and perhaps not even unintentionally, that there is a process out there that looks after their interests. The other side of that is their ability to influence that process, and whether they feel that they can have some voice, some influence over what's going on, which sets up this matrix. And this, as I say, can happen at every level. It can happen inside organizations, it can happen at the level of nations. If people don't think they're protected, and they feel that they can't influence what's going on, they are really frustrated. And this can only go on for so long. In an organization, people will quit. In broader societies, they'll start to demonstrate. They'll start to push back hard. If they think that they can influence the process, then they'll become activists. They'll become they'll argue for change. They'll say, we've got to do this in a different way. If they believe that they're protected, but don't have much influence, then they're going to be okay. They'll say, we don't need to influence. This is a characteristic of a number of parts of the world. This is where Finland was for many years. Part of the reason that Marianne is in Finland is because there was a breakdown there. There was a breakdown, there's a loss of confidence in the regulator because of a series of failures at a mining pilot project that resulted in contamination and some fairly serious environmental problems. It was the regulator that lost credibility at that point. So they moved across to the other side. They were frustrated. They pushed back through political process, found that they could have influence, so they've moved into the activist side of things and are now operating much more on the participation side, where there has been an effort to bring people into a process that would lead, hopefully, to better outcomes. And at that point, I think I've said enough. So that's me.
So I thought what we could do is sit down again and have a conversation and ask some questions. I'd like for you to be able to catch your breath.